Now, one of the best things about the NEX system is that you can mount third-party lenses to it. Now, I'm a Nikon shooter. I shoot with the D700. I have a bunch of very good full-frame lenses that I can just mount on this with the right adapter. And basically this means that I don't have to re-buy these lenses. And in my opinion anyways, some of the Nikon lenses are better than the Sony counterparts. Now, I find the shooting experience with third-party lenses to be completely different than, say, a camcorder or, say, the native NEX lenses. I mean, you don't have autofocus, it's manual focus, you don't have IS, and so really it's a different experience. You're more deliberate in the video that you're shooting. Now, the key advantage of the NEX over, say, Micro Four Thirds is the APS-C sensor, which is a 1.5 crop, and in video mode it's 1.6. So this means that your third-party lens that you put on here retains more of its focal length than with Micro Four Thirds, which is a 2.0 crop, and then it crops even more in video mode. Now, this is your basic lens adapter for your NEX 5, 7, and so on. On the front, it has an aluminum face where your third-party lens attaches. It will also have a lens release latch, and around the side of the lens adapter, it's got an aperture control ring. Not all of them do. Make sure if you need one, buy one with an aperture control ring. And at the back, that's where you mount it to your NEX body itself. And you can see that there's no electrical contacts. This is a dumb adapter. Now, this particular adapter came with a tripod mount as well. And this is important if you're mounting heavy lenses to your NEX. You want the weight of those lenses to be on the adapter itself and not the NEX, which was not designed for heavy lenses. Probably the best place to buy an adapter is on eBay. There you'll find thousands of well-priced adapters. What you don't want to do is go to a brick and mortar store where they sell you adapters for 8 to 10 times as much money. So of course you can mount any type of lens that you want on it. From my experience, I find that wide angle lenses are the best, whether it's a prime or a zoom. And this is because the NEX doesn't have IS when you mount a third-party lens to it. So any focal length over, say, 40 or 50 millimeters, you're going to have a hard time holding it stable for video use. Now, of course, you can get a tripod, and with that you can mount longer focal lengths and get more stable video that way. In terms of prime versus zooms, I prefer primes mostly because they're more compact, the optical quality tends to be better, and you get faster apertures. Now, of course, you can use a zoom, but they tend to be slower. The ones that are constant and fast, say a 2.8, they tend to be larger. And I think if you're going for the zoom, it's better to go with a native NEX lens, say they're 18 to 200, or the new 55 to 210. That's going to give you image stabilization as well. Lastly, with a manual zoom lens, you have to mess around with focus and you have to mess around with the zooming. And when you do that during a video use, you're going to introduce a lot of camera shake, and that's just not good video. The 5N takes images in 16 megapixels, and you have to understand that in video mode, it's about 2 megapixels. So you have 1/8 of the number of pixels. And now you consider compression, motion, and the nominal resolution is probably less than that. So this is important because this gives you a lot of leeway in terms of focusing. You don't have to be dead accurate all the time. It's also important to understand the impact of aperture on focus. Now, most lenses, especially at large apertures, will focus on one point in the frame, and this is where your subject is. Everything behind and everything in front will be out of focus to some degree, as shown in this diagram. What you want to do is set the aperture so that there's a focus buffer around your subject, so that your subject can move in and out of focus, but still stay sharp while the background elements stay out of focus. This is shown in pink in this diagram. So this means that your subject can move in and out and you don't have to refocus during your shot, which can introduce focus shake. You also want to avoid putting anything in front of your subject. As you increase your aperture, the focus buffer gets smaller, so there's less margin for error. But it also means that the background elements are blown out, and it gives you that really nice shallow depth of field that you see in nice still photos. But now you can get that in video. Now this is really good for, if your subject is standing still, whether sitting, standing, with very little movement in and out of the plane of focus. It's great for interviews. As you decrease your aperture, the focus buffer increases, and basically everything becomes in focus. This is very characteristic of smaller aperture cameras, camcorders, and for the most part I try not to do this. The reason I bought an APS-C camera and the reason I use large aperture lenses is to get that shallow depth of field effect. Touch to zoom means that you touch anywhere on the LCD and it's going to give you a magnified image, allowing you to fine-tune focus. This is an upgrade over the NEX 5 because you can touch anywhere on the screen. And for me, I like putting my subject off-centered, so I don't have to zoom in and mess around with the cursor. It's a very good upgrade. This is something you do before you take your shot. You can't do this when you're taking a video. Also consider that you don't have to be perfect in your focusing. The nominal resolution of the video is less than 1080p. The magnified image is much more than that. With focus peaking, the camera highlights parts of the image that have the highest contrast. This may or may not be the point of focus. So you simply adjust focus until the part of the image is highlighted where you want it to be in focus. Focus peaking is very good for run-and-gun situations when you don't have time to zoom in and focus, or when you're taking a video and you have to refocus. Focus peaking is not accurate enough for still photos. Now, of course, how you frame the shot depends on a lot of things. Your lens, the look you're trying to get, your subject, and so on. My approach is that I take the shot as if I'm taking a photograph. So this might mean putting the subject off center, using the rule of thirds, using depth of field to my advantage, and so on. There's a number of techniques that I won't get into right now. But basically take 5-10 seconds before you take the shot, try to frame it so that it's interesting, and so that it kind of looks like a moving photograph. Now in terms of tracking your subject, don't go crazy here. Don't go trying to track your subject's every single move. You're going to get frustrated, your viewer's going to get frustrated because of all the shakiness and all the rapid movement. It's okay to let your subject move across the frame and move in and out of the plane of focus. Sometimes this makes the video more interesting and adds an extra dimension to the video as well. What I find helps is using a wide-angle lens and trying to anticipate the subject's movement. A fader or variable ND filter is an ND filter that lets you go from 0 to any number of stops. This filter here goes from 0 to 8. As a videographer, you want control over the aperture and shutter speed. For myself, I like shooting wide open, but in daylight this is very difficult. You can be at ISO 100, set the proper shutter speed, but in order to have a proper exposure, you need to stop down, and that defeats the purpose of wanting to shoot wide open for the depth of field effect. So with an ND filter, you set the aperture, you set the shutter speed, and you set the ISO to 100. And then you dial in the amount of ND filtering that you need so that you get the proper exposure. And as you go from shot to shot, all you have to do is adjust the ND filter to get the proper exposure for that shot. Lastly, you don't have to spend a lot of money for this. The one I have right now is not the best one. I would never take photos with this, but for video use, it's excellent.